So I've seen the from a rather, when it first started on the West Coast in the San Francisco Bay Area, it was more like a fashion, like Zen Buddhist way of thinking, paradoxes and enigmatic statements were kind of fashionable to fling about or think about at that time among the intelligentsia of the Bay Area. And so it could be seen as something very superficial and just a kind of silly fashion of the age. But it actually affected many of us in a profound way. As you can see, I'm sitting here now and spending most of my life as a Buddhist monk because it first started with the kind of interpretations of Japanese Zen Buddhism that were available in English in 1955. Now, Luang Por Chah, I found, was when I went to Thailand, my main interest had been through the Japanese Zen literature. I'd never practiced it. I'd never found a teacher in the Bay Area. I looked during those years I lived in Berkeley. I went everywhere where there was a possibility of finding some meditation teacher, but couldn't find any. And so this, of course, made it very clear I had to go to Asia to find one. I thought of going to Japan and taking up Zen Buddhism, but when I was assigned to Sabah, and then I was in a nice warm place, in fact quite hot, and then going to Thailand, nice warm country, and I remember those cold winters in Japan in the Navy, and I heard that the Japanese monks did not heat their monasteries. So people wonder, they say, why did you leave Zen Buddhism and join Theravada? What did you find so, why did you choose Theravada over Zen? And there's nothing doctrinal, it's just the weather. So then Thailand, of course, offers an opportunity to live in a country that's, you could say, is 95% Buddhist. And there are not many countries left like that, where they have, most of the population regard themselves as Theravadan Buddhists. And of course, the king Bhumibol Adulyadej, he's a Buddhist, and the whole structure and the cultural values of Thailand are based on, very strongly intertwined with Buddhism. Now, living with somebody like Luang Por Chah for 10 years, I thought was indeed an honor, because I'd never really met anybody that affected me so strongly as he did. And when I met him, I was not particularly looking for a teacher. I didn't have any great need at that time, or I didn't feel any great interest in. I'd been to so many teachers already. I was more or less looking for a place to train as a bhikkhu. I thought I wanted to, if I was a bhikkhu, I wanted to be a good one, and I needed the discipline. I needed to learn how to obey a teacher, how to surrender myself to discipline that I had no ability to manipulate or change in any way. I saw that during my life, I had lived very much in manipulating conditions for my own benefit, and the result was not a positive one. It was not the way out of suffering. In fact, by the age of 30, I was quite a miserable character. And so, learning to submit, to surrender to a form, to a tradition, was quite a new thing to be doing for me. Even though it's an ancient tradition, I'd never, Americans, we don't have ancient traditions in that country. It's all about progress and modernization and making things better. So learning to live within a very conservative type of Thai Buddhism in northeast Thailand and Vinaya discipline, but also it wasn't just, a kind of military training camp atmosphere. It was based on mindfulness, reflection, and observing. Now, it was a unique situation for me because I was the first Westerner to go there, to be with Ajahn Chah. And I couldn't speak the Thai language, and nobody there could speak English. And then the cultural attitude was very different, from my own American values. And so it was, it brought up a lot of all kinds of emotions, negative emotions. At first I was very inspired. I had the inspiration. But then actually through through living there and having to learn another language and conform to a system after you'd been so, emphasized you were nonconformist and you were asserting yourself as an independent creature, and then finding yourself in absolute conformity to an ancient tradition. This brought up all kinds of doubts and negative reactions in my mind. Now, Luang Por Chah was very good at getting me to look at my mental states. Even before we had a common language to discuss Dhamma with, he somehow had this intuitive sense. He could pick up on the kind of emotional quality that one had in the moment, and then his direction was always encouraging one to look at it, to see it, to observe it. And so they have this sense of being the knower of the condition, not the condition. So even when learning the Thai language, there were certain phrases that I'd pick up because you'd hear them quite often. And these phrases, just simple reflections, Luang Por Chah kept using in his talks, in his Dharma talks. And they were just like don't be the owner of your feelings, be the witness to them. So this attitude, they used the mantra a lot of Puto, the kind of Buddha's name, as a way of reminding yourself to be the awareness itself and observe the condition you're actually feeling in the moment. And I found this so something I could actually do because of my frustration, my reactions to discipline, and the kind of paranoia that can generate in somebody's mind when they don't quite understand what's going on most of the time. So the way they'd laugh, or there'd be a joke or laughter, and I wouldn't know what they were laughing at, and then they'd look at me, and I could interpret that as they're laughing at me as being some kind of humiliation, or I could look at that feeling, the way I would on my personal way of interpreting experience. I began to observe it in the sense of being the knower rather than the condition. Began to take its effect so that my life in the monastery, within a couple of years, I'd become really I thought myself very much of a Thai monk. And when the Western men started coming there, I didn't really want them, actually. Because I'd learned how to be a Thai monk, and they hadn't, and then I was the only one that, I had to translate for them. And of course, all the kind of wild attitudes and that, this is the hippie era, and the kind of characters that would arrive at the monastery in Ubon. I found, it was like distressing to me, because I had kind of developed my practice through this kind of surrendering to, in that way, and learning to find a measure of peace, tranquility, through not having a lot of conflict with others. And then, of course, the ones that bring up most of one's strong emotions, I found, were other Americans. They could arouse extreme emotions more than any Thai could do. And so eventually I actually I ran away after my 6th year, because I couldn't face having to be with all these Western monks, and me being the senior one. So I deliberately left and eventually went to India, and there I spent 6 months walking as a Tudong monk in India. I thought I wanted to see if I could actually live like Gautama the Buddha. And so, during that time, I kept thinking back of all the generosity I'd received in Thailand and of Luang Por Chah. And it was in India that I had this strong opening of the heart. It was what I call Gatanyu Gataveti, or gratitude. It wasn't just a kind of intellectual thanks for the meditation lessons kind of thing. It was a really gut feeling of realizing how much had been given to me, support from the lay people, encouragement from the lay people, the bhikkhus that I lived with, and of course Luang Por Chah as a teacher.